This one?
Okay.
Okay, 7A.
There we go. 7A1, right at the top. Amar Rabbi Avahu. We are, you see, one line down? Rabbi Avahu taught. Gadol Yom HaGeshamim. Okay, this is a great one. Because
Great one. I love this.
This is crazy.
The next few pages are phenomenal.
You read this, it blows your mind. And it really, I think, in some ways changes the way you see cities like London and Seattle. Gadol Yom HaGeshamim. Greater is the day of rain. Mitechiyat HaMetim. From the revival of the dead. I don't know, I never thought of rain that way. So, how does he qualify a statement of that magnitude? De'ilu techiyat HaMetim l'sadikim. The reviving of the dead, that everyone's going to be reunited at the time of the Mashiach, is only Sadiqim. V'ilu Gishamim, but when it comes to rain, ben l'Sadiqim, ben l'Rishayim, it rains for the Sadiqim and it rains for the Rishayim. So a day of rain is greater than Techiyat HaMetim. Okay, maybe you should move to that side so you're not blocked. Okay, there you go. I want you to just bury that for a minute in your head, this line from Rabbi Avahu. Okay? Now, obviously, the word greater here is understood in a specific context. What does it mean greater? In what way is it greater? And his answer is because it has a wider distribution. So clearly the terminology of greater here is not in impact or in wonder, right? It's in one specific vector, okay? In the vector of whom it gives to, all right? But we'll come back to this in just a minute, and I want to also understand why it is that the Gemara is going to such lengths of trying to figure out how we're comparing the rain, what we're comparing it to. Okay. Upliga de Rabbi Yosef, and he argues, Rabbi Avahu argues, he says that rain is greater than Techiyat HaMetim. The Rabbi Yosef, he argues on Rabbi Yosef. The Amar Rabbi Yosef taught, Mitoch she'ishkula ki Techiyat HaMetim, kiva'uha b'Techiyat HaMetim. When do we say that beracha? When do we mention the power of rain? Mashiv Baruch. We say that, right? Right? It's right there. It's in the bracha of so you see it's mentioned in the context of God's ability to revive the dead. So it's like, Hashem, you're amazing. You bring the dead back to life, Mr. Frankenstein, and also precipitation. Okay, amazing. So you see from the equivalence, from the placement, from the juxtaposition of Geshamim to Techiyat HaMetim, you see that it is, right, Shekula, it's equal to Techiyat HaMetim. So this is opinion, even though it's saying that it's equal to, is still less than the opinion of Rabbi Avahu, who says it's greater than. Okay, clear. Now, obviously, again, if anyone is sitting here looking for 1 second at this, you already got from my foreshadowing comment that doesn't really necessarily need to be a machloket.
Right.
Why? Why does it not need to be a machloket?
They're both great.
One is saying it's great like Techiyat HaMetim. One is saying it's greater than. One of them is referring to the fact that it is a mighty thing of God from God, and one of them, and therefore it's equated. And one of them is saying something that it's greater than. Why? Because God is doing this chesed even with people who don't deserve it. Okay. However, and this is to me where it gets a little bit interesting, right? If you remember, right in the beginning of the Masechet, we mentioned another reason why it might be equal to Techiyat HaMetim. I don't know if you guys remember that. The word mafteach.
Strength of rain, right?
Mafteach. What does mafteach stand for?
Key?
What does key stand for? What is the keys? God holds a set of keys in his hand he doesn't give out to anyone else. Mafteach stands for, as the Gemara said, right? Mafteach shel chaya, giving birth to a child. Mafteach shel Techiyat HaMetim. Mafteach shel Geshamim, right? And so matar. And finally, the Gemara said, what's the final mafteach? The final mafteach, according to the other opinion, is, and some people even say, parnasa. So what does mafteach stand for? Matar, parnasa, techiyah, and chaya, pregnancy. Mm-hmm. So the equivalence of rain, Techiyat HaMetim, we already had her in the Masechet. Okay? Now we're saying it's greater than because it applies to everybody. So it doesn't have to be that they're arguing. One might be referring to the greatness of the deed, The second one might be referring to the generosity of when God gives that greatness. But yet the Gemara seems to say that it is a machloket. So the Gemara understood this slightly differently than we are. And let me explain why I think the Gemara understood this to be a machloket, even though I just gave you an obvious way out. Let me give you an example, and then I'll give you the answer. If I tell you I gave $100 to tzedakah, am I a generous guy?
Maybe. It's relative. Right.
Generous guy, right? How about if I tell you I gave $100 to every single person in the world? That's what I'm saying here. The second opinion is comparing the $100 to the giving of God is giving this, God is giving this. The second thing is saying, yeah, but God gave this to everyone, to the Tzaddikim, to the Rishaim, to the Benonim, to everyone. Everyone got rain, right? So what in the world is the Gemara? How is the Gemara saying it's a machloket? Listen to this. What was the proof of Rav Yosef that they're equivalent? The proof of Rav Yosef was in the fact that it's mentioned in
The same beracha.
the same beracha. Let's go back to the pasuk. Let's go back to the prayer where it mentions them in a synonymous manner. Ata gibor leolam Adonai. You are mighty forever, O Hashem. Mechayem etim ata Rav Loshia. You revive the dead. Rav Loshia, tremendous salvation. Mashiva ruch b'dageshem. Over here, it's referring. The act of givurah is referring not to the width of God's giving, but rather to the length of it, the strength of it. And since Rav Yosef's point is in the givurah itself, so therefore the Gemara understood that he was not referring to this answer that we could have just given, where we're trying to make Rav Yosef be about the action and Rabbi Avau about the distribution. Okay.
But just because God gives something to everybody doesn't mean it's a good thing.
Doesn't mean it's a?
Good thing.
What do you mean?
Everyone gets death. Is that a good thing?
No, but here, since it's a beracha, the distribution of that beracha to more people is a greater act of chesed.
But we also learned that not every rain is a beracha.
Boom! That's what I asked you to hold on to it. And not only that, we're going to learn something specific which is going to seem to attack this point. Okay, so let's carry on. Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda teaches, Gadol Yom HaGeshamim, greater is the day of Geshamim. It is great. Ki Yom Shenitna Bo Torah. Like the day of Shesh B'Sivan Bo Natan HaTorah LeYisrael. The day of the giving of the Torah. Shne'emar, like the pasuk says, Ya'arof Kamatar Lekchi. My words, lekhi means my lessons, right? Will drip, will come down, kimatar, like rain. Ve'en lekach ela Torah. Whenever you say the word lekach, the first thing you think of is the Torah. Why? Shene'emar, like the pasuk says, ki lekach tov natati lachem. I gave you a great teaching. Torati al ta'azovu. Don't give up my Torah. So you see the word lekach refers to the Torah, and you see that God says Ya'arof kam matar lekhi, that my messages, my Torah, drips down like rain. So we compared Torah to rain.
Is it a Gezerah Shava?
No,
it's two parts because of Lekach?
No, that's a good point. Lekach would be Gezerah Shava if you were learning out something. Here it's a descriptive terminology. Okay? But it is a hekesh, because we're comparing the two. My words will drip like rain means I compared Torah to rain. Now listen to what the Gemara says here. Mi nitla b'mi. Who did you compare to whom? Let's say, as an example, I'm a basketball player. You want to find out how good a basketball player I am. You say, you know what, this guy Farhi, he's like Jordan. Who's better, Jordan or Farhi? Jordan. You know why?
Because you compared yourself.
Excellent. Jordan's the example.
Yeah.
He's the iconoclast. He's the measurement, the barometer against which you're describing greatness. So if it says Ya'arof, God says, you know how my words dripped? They dripped like rain.
Ooh.
Illustrating
Rain
that rain is better, more important than the Torah.
Okay, but we know that.
We know what?
The Torah is more important than rain.
But here it's saying the opposite.
Okay.
Now, I have another problem with this Gemara. It's true. It is true, right? Well, I guess maybe it's not a good question. I was going to give you my question. Tell me if you agree with my question. It is true that when you compare Farhi to Jordan, Jordan is better. You know why? Because Jordan is the best of all time. However, right, if someone is a relatively new person and we don't know what he's like, so the comparison of him to a relatively well-known person might actually not be because the other person is greater, rather the other person is more well-known or established. Okay? So I'll give you an example of that in the business world. In the business world, right, you have, every time someone's up and coming, they compare him, they say, this guy's the new other guy, right? And they compare him to the new Steve Jobs, as an example. So I'll give you an example. Elon Musk was compared to the new Steve Jobs. Elon Musk's market cap now is so far ahead of, but we had no one to compare a tech disruptor to other than the guy that everybody knew. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. So in many instances, that's the case. So how are we saying minit la b'mi over here, that rain is greater than Torah? Rain had always been around. Torah ya'arov kamatar lekhi. Where is that pasuk? It's in the Torah. The Torah's got to compare itself to an example that you already know. So it may not be bigger, it just might be more well known. Yeah?
Oh, before, and also there is a lot of example where the student can become more greater than
Than the teacher.
And then the comparison is that, okay, this, I don't know, you can be in business or in Torah where the second one can become greater, that you can compare than now we believe that this guy is greater than this guy.
So then why is he saying this then? Again, and this is bothering me because these are all nice platitudes, but the Gemara, it's not poetry.
I think it's maybe just...
It's not poetry. It's not like, for thy kiss, falleth upon my cheeks. Like the thunderous applause of 1,000 seagulls. Like, yeah.
The only difference here is it's from Haazinu. Haazinu is a song.
Oh! I thought you were going to say something else. When is Hazinu?
Huh?
When is Hazinu?
Right before Rosh Hashanah.
It's the end of the Torah. So the
Torah
had 40 years to establish itself in the desert before Hazinu. So that was good. I started asking the question, and then I realized that this is the answer to my question. Because this pasuk is not said when God gives the Torah. If he did that, then that would make a lot of sense. Right? But over here, it's at the end of the time in the desert. So they should have already known, it should have already been an underwhelming mashal. Okay? Let's carry on.
What I'm saying is because it's a song, it is like poetry.
It is like poetry, but still at best it's equated. Sorry?
You raised a totally different angle.
Sorry?
I said it's totally a pivot.
What is?
What you say now, it's a new element.
It's a new perspective.
It's a new perspective.
I want to come back to this, when we get to the end of the Gemara, I want to come back to this. Like, why is it important? It's greater than Techiyat Emetim. Oh, no, it's not great. The same as. Okay. It's great like the day we receive the Torah. Why? Because it's compared to. Okay, let's see. We'll carry on. The Gemara continues. Havi omer katanit la bagadol. You would say that the small is always hung on. It's compared to the big. So therefore, we see that the rain is greater than the day of the receiving of the Torah. Rava would ask the pasuk. Ya'arov kamatar lekhi. The pasuk says, my words, my teachings should drip like rain. Uchtiv tizal katal imrati. Also, it uses the words of God. God's words should descend like dew. So is it like dew or is it like rain? The Gemara says the answer is im talmid chacham hagunhu. If he's a good talmid chacham, pay attention to that. Talmid chacham hagun. Talmid chacham means a Torah scholar. What does hagun mean?
Logic.
Appropriate.
Good character.
Good character.
Yeah.
He's correct. He's righteous. Im talmid chacham hagunu, which that means that there's a talmid chacham that's not. Okay, but that's a topic for another night. Talmid chacham hagunu katal. Then he's compared to dew. V'im lav orfeu kamatar, and if not orfeu, it hits him in the back of the neck Kamatar, like rain. Now there's two ways of understanding this, and I want to take you through both ways of understanding it. The first way of understanding it is Rava is saying, one second, we're comparing Torah to rain, and we're comparing Torah to dew. Those are not the same thing. What's the message in comparing it to rain, and what's the message in comparing it to dew? The Gemara says, one second, if the guy's a Talmid Chacham, then the rain comes down to him, the Torah comes down to him like dew. Dew is pleasant, dew is easy. You barely even notice, by the way, that dew came down. Okay? There's never a moment, if you sat out all night, you wouldn't notice that there was dew coming down. You all of a sudden you look in the morning, the grass is wet.
Right.
Okay? Whereas when it's rain, it bothers, it gets your clothing soaked, it's this, it's that. Okay. So it's very pleasant. Rain, tal is always a siman beracha. Okay? However, the rain, you have back-breaking rain, it's pouring down. You know, it could hit the guy in the back, it could be annoying, it could be devastating, it could be, and what is he using the words for? Oref means, where do we else have the word oref? Ki'am, kishe oref. It's a nation that is stubborn, stiff-necked. Okay? When you're raining, what do people do?
Tighten the neck.
Tighten the neck. Okay? So it's raining, it's coming down on the person's neck, it's annoying the person. It's causing the person stress. The person's constricting their body under the rain, trying to protect themselves. So if a person is not Talmid Chacham Hagun, then the Torah for him, what is the Torah for him going to be?
Difficult.
Yeah, or
Backbreaker,
it's a backbreaker. It's a neck breaker. Okay. Now that's one understanding. The second understanding is that we're not referring to what the Torah does for him, but rather, if the Talmid Chacham is an appropriate Talmid Chacham, he behaves the right way, speaks the right way, interacts the right way, then he's like Katal. Tal works for everybody. There's no one who Tal doesn't work for. You have some rabbis, they're only good for a certain crowd. Only if they're here. Or only if they're here. Like, you know? But you have Talmid Chacham Hagun, he measures himself. That's what Hagun means, appropriate. He figures out how to give these guys this, how to give that person that, the lady is this, the kids that. Everyone gets what they need from the Talmid Chacham. If a person's like that, he's like Tal. He's easy. But if he's not, then what happens? It comes down in a way where actually it causes people to turn away. What does the word orpa mean? We just said oref. It means? Neck, right? In the first part, it meant that it's breaking his neck. In the second definition, it comes from the word where they turn the back of their neck to him. Interestingly enough, we already have historical precedents for this. Could someone think? Excellent. Orpa. Ruth and Orpa are sisters-in-law, right? They are the daughters-in-law of Naomi. Naomi's two sons, Machlon and Chilion, they die. Naomi comes to them and she says, no, go back. What are you going to do? I have no more sons and I want to marry. My husband's dead, my kids are dead, you're going to come with me? Ruth's like, no, your people, my people, I'm with you till the end. Elukai, I'm with you till, right, you know. Orpah says, she kisses her mother-in-law goodbye and she turns around. Why is she called Orpah? Because what does she give to her mother-in-law?
The back
of the neck. Orfehu is the verb of that noun. It's saying you meet a Talmid Chacham that's like this. He's making you be what he wants, and as opposed to going to the people where they are to try and raise them. Orfehu, turn your neck. Va'arafto. Okay. Kamatar. Orfehu kamatar. Tanya. Haya Rabbi Bana Omer. Rabbi Bana used to teach. Kol ha'osek b'Torah lishma. Anyone who toils in the Torah for the sake of heaven, Torato na'asit lo sam haim. The Torah becomes for him like an elixir, like a potion of life, like medicine. Shine Emar, and the Gemara is going to proceed to give 3 different pesukim. Etz chaim hi lamachazekim ba. When do we sing this song? Etz chaim hi. Whether you're Sephardic or Ashkenaz, when do we say it? We take out the Torah. Yeah. Why? Yeah. Because the Torah is Etz chaim hi lamachazekim. That's what we're saying. We're not just randomly quoting pesukim. As you open up the Torahs are revealed. What do we say? Etz Hayim Hi. That is a tree of life. V'tomchei mi'usha, and the ones that support it are blessed with happiness. So you see that the Torah is considered to be a tree of eternal life. Ve'omer, and the pasuk says, Rif'ut teheh l'sharecha. The healing shall come through the belly button. Ve'omer, and again, it's again talking about Torah. Ve'omer, and the pasuk also says, Ki motzi'i matzah hayim. For those who find me and toil in Torah, Those who find me, says the Torah, matzah hayim, has found goodness, has found life. So you see, each one of these Pesukim describes Torah as something that brings life to the person. Now, my friends, if there's 3 different Pesukim, know ye that each one of the Pesukim is giving you a different lesson. So I was thinking, in what way are these 3 Pesukim ideated, differentiated one from the other, and what is the different messages of Torah? And I came up with something which I think is so simple and so obvious. These 3 times, one pasuk is saying, Es Chaim here is a tree of life that you grab onto. The second time it's saying about how the lifeline of Torah is something that comes into the belly button, into the navel of the baby, okay? And the third time it's talking about that someone who finds it finds life. We're referring to 3 different types of people who connect with Torah in 3 different ways. You have one type of person who's so connected to Torah, he's so attached to Torah, that he goes and he grabs it with everything he's got. Et hayim hi mahazikim ba. He's literally, imagine a tree like growing out of the side of a mountain, of a cliff. Guy falls off the cliff, he grabs onto the branch. He's holding on literally for dear life. He understands consciously that the grabbing onto the Torah, that's what gives him his life. You have some people that they know this. No matter what, the class, I'm at the class. I don't care what else is going on. They say the Hafetz Chaim, he had a store, he was very poor. So he had a little store he opened. How long did he open the store for? Exactly as long as he needed to have money to live that day. Once he made 4 pennies, $4, he closed the store and went to learn. He was in this, that's it, Chalas, he's there. One time he's learning, his wife has a major opportunity to sell goods, and she wants to go get her husband to close the deal. Husband's in the door's locked, he's learning. It's knocking, this, that. Afterwards he comes out, she says, what happened? He says, I was learning, I'm sorry, I was so engrossed, I didn't even hear anything. She said to him, but I had this opportunity to sell. This guy would have bought tons of goods. He says, the Pasuk says, listen to this. The Pasuk says, Zot HaTorah, this is the Torah, Adam ki yamut ba'oil. This is the Torah of a person who dies in the tent. And it tells you the laws of Tum'ah that are applicable to someone who's under the same roof as a dead body. As we know, Kohen can't be in the building. But at the time of the Beit HaMikdash, it wasn't only Kohanim that had to be pure. We also, Israelim, had to be pure. If you wanted to eat from the korbanot, you want all these different things that a person needs. If you want to go to the Beit HaMikdash, you can't go into the Beit HaMikdash when you're tameh. Yisur karet, okay? So, there's many different types. So the Pasuk says, Zot Torah, Adam ki. This is the Torah. Adam, and a person dies in the tent. Said the Hafetz Haim to his wife. He says, you know what it means? It's telling you this is Torah. Adam ki yamut ba'oil. When he goes into the tent of Torah, for the time he's learning, he's dead. But I'm calling you, there's a boy. What would you do if I was dead? You'd figure something else out. You'd close the deal yourself. You tell the guy, I'm really sorry, he can't answer the phone now. He says, when I'm learning, honey, he says, I'm dead to the world. The first modality of where the Torah gives of Sama Hayim is when you see these Torah scholars. They're learning, they're like this over the Gemara, they're screaming, they're sweating, they're hoarse, arguing. You see, you look at the guy, you're like, okay, that's the guy who's invested. He knows the Torah is his life. The guy has no money, he has 10 kids to marry off. But instead of, what is he doing? He's in the Bet Midrash. That guy, I understand Torah is his lifeline. Then the Torah Pasuk continues and says, no. Even if a guy, his relationship with Torah is not because he understands that the Torah is life or death. He doesn't get it. It's a natural connection. Like the navel, like the food goes, the baby not even chewing, doing nothing. The baby's free floating in amniotic fluid. But the Torah is giving him. You have a guy, grew up religious. He goes, there's a class in the morning when the rabbi speaks, class in the afternoon. He's in it, but he's in it naturally. The Torah says even that guy who's in the tradition from that way, he's connected in that way by osmosis, even that guy, the Torah provides him with lifeblood to be able to survive, to be able to improve, to be able to have everything he needs in life. But then the Gemara continues and says, what about the guy that doesn't get it? And what about the guy that does not have a natural connection? Kimosai, he's walking along the road and he found it like a lost object on the side of the road. You have a guy, this is my lifeblood, this is my life. You have a guy, never knew he cared about Judaism. He thought he hated Judaism, thought he hated rabbis. He comes for Friday night. My wife's cooking is outstanding. I have a pretty good whiskey cabinet. We're sitting there, we're drinking, we're this, that. I share words of Torah. The guy's like, this is amazing. He found it. Even for someone like that, the Torah could bring energy to his bones, could bring electricity to his veins. It wakes him up. It makes him passionate about life. It's a potion of life for him. The Gemara continues and says, however, but a person who deals in Torah, who studies and toils in Torah, not for the sake of heaven, not for its own sake, becomes for him a potion of death, a poison. Like the pasuk says, "Ya'arof kamatar lekhi." My words, they drip like rain. But as Rafi said, the word Ya'arof, we have it somewhere else. We have it ve'im lo tivdeh va'arafto egla arufa. What do you do? How do you kill the animal? They take an axe and they chop it off from the back of the neck. They break the spine. So it's a very violent expression, this word Ya'arof. The arifa kills him. So you see the Torah, if you're not doing it for the right reasons, it can kill the person.
What's the wrong reason?
Excellent. We're going to come to that in a minute. I'm going to pull a Jeopardy. You know what I call that?
What is?
Ask it in the form of a question. Okay? Now, Shne'emar, like the pasuk says, how do we know that arufa is hariga? Ve'arafu shamet ha'egla banahal. They took the egla arufa. What's it talking about over there? It's talking about a person, a tale of two cities. In between these two cities, Long Branch and Deal, they find a dead body. They measure in between Deal and Long Branch. It's exactly equidistant between the two cities. That's what he was referring back to. Excellent. Okay? So what do they do in a situation like that? They take an egla, this a calf, they do the egla arufa. It's like an element where they witness the brutality that happens when they do this to the animal, and they understand this is what happened to a person on our watch. You know, we didn't escort him out of the city. We didn't make sure that people knew that he had connections here. People thought that this was someone they could take advantage of, and that's our fault, okay? So we see, but the word va'arafu means they chop off the neck. So you see that that's the case. Now, the problem with this is that very, very specifically, we have a very famous teaching that says, Le'olam ya'asok adam beTorah mitzvot shelo lishma. A person should always engage in Torah and mitzvot shelo lishma. I have a bunch of kids. They come to shul on a Shabbat morning. Why are they coming to shul?
Get candy.
They're getting candy. They're winning Knicks tickets. Why are the adults coming to shul? Because they're a beverage fund. Everybody has a reason why they're coming, right? But no one is coming because they love Hodu. Like, you know, Rabbi, I can't get enough. When the Chazan is like, Amonai Melech, I wait the whole week for that. Nobody says that to me. Okay? They're coming Shalom Lishma. They're coming for the social. They're coming for the Oizbay. They're knis. But it might not be for the best of reasons. And what do we say? Adrabah. That's the best thing in the world. Mitoch Shalom Lishma, from not for the sake of heaven, comes Shba Lishma, comes for the sake of heaven. So how can we say over here, a person who learns Shalom Lishma, right? It causes it's a poisonous, it's a death. So this question was originally asked by one of the Rishonim. It's asked by Tosafot, and there's many answers. Tosafot differentiates between a non-good reason and a bad reason. We got a lawyer here, another lawyer sitting right next to him, and the other lawyers in the room. Right, a couple lawyers. There's a difference between a bad reason and a non-good reason. So let me give you an example. Let's say I see someone poor on the street, I give him $5. Good reason would be, I have compassion for a poor guy on the street. What's a non-good reason?
You want to make yourself look good in front of your friends.
What's a bad reason?
Get out of my face.
What's a bad reason?
I want to see this guy buy drugs and kill himself.
What's a bad reason?
That got very dark, very fast.
Very bad.
That's very bad. Okay? So there's shades here in this gradation. So Ray just gave us the worst of the worst. That gives him a $5. It says on it, may only be used for drugs. Preferably laced heroin. Like, all right? Exactly. Right? Now, what's that's obviously very bad. But there's also, like I said, gradated. It might be that if I made sure that everyone on the block was looking, that's bad. Because it's for my honor.
Right.
What's a non-good reason? A non-good reason might be where I get a tax break. So it's not a bad reason. It's not a good reason. I didn't do it selflessly. It was selfish. But it wasn't bad selfish. Nothing wrong with that. So there's levels between. Let's say as an example, you have change in your pocket, it's driving you crazy. It's just moving around. I don't like having anything in my pocket. You'll never find anything in my pocket. Even my wallet is in the back of my phone. My wife tells me we go to a thing, she'll go to a wedding, she's like, hold the keys. I'm like, I have 7 pockets. I don't want anything in any of them. Right? Hazita, she beats me because she has no pockets. You know, I'm always wondering to myself. So I bought her a clutch.
You said last week if you drop $1 on the floor, you didn't know you drop it, and someone picks it up for tzedakah, it's still considered like you did it, even though you don't.
Absolutely, we learn that, as we said, we learn it from Shikha. So what we're not saying over here that there's bad reasons, good reasons, and you're not getting any reward. What we're saying here is that I'm giving you the differentiation between a bad reason and a not good reason. Lishma means for the sake of heaven. What does lo lishma mean? It doesn't mean for the sake of Satan.
No agenda.
It just means not for the best reason. Okay? So when we say mitoch shelo lishma, ba lishma means we mean for not a positive reason, that's still good enough. Getting Knicks tickets is not a negative reason to come to shul. Okay? What if you're coming to shul so that people see you in shul, so that you could actually be considered a good member, trustworthy member of the community, so you could rip people off? Ooh. That's not lo lishma. Ray's thinking, have I got $5 for that guy? Right? Yeah. What is lo lishma? Just means that you didn't do it for the right reasons. But then there's also for the negative. Tosafot answers. What are we talking about over here when we say lo lishma? We mean not the not good reason, but the bad reason, where the person is doing it in order to manipulate. I'm learning the halachot so that I could rip off the guy and beat him in court and steal the money from him. Because I know the legal way to rip off the guy. Or I'm doing it only in order to be for my own honor.
Isn't the definition of rasha on something where
So it's like stealing.
he's learning just to criticize the other one?
Yes, there is an element of rishut in there as well.
Yeah, it's like stealing.
Yeah, well, yes.
In that consequence.
So Tosafot gives a few different versions of bad. Exactly. What does lekanter mean? You want to start fights. So you know what you do? You have that guy who, if I'm talking about the halachot of Maim Acharonim and Shacharit, all of a sudden he's opening up the Shulchan Aruch. He's trying to learn about Maim Acharonim. You know why? Only so he could say, Rabbi, that's no, actually that's what he's learning it for. So he's only learning it lekanter. Why is that the Torah's sama mavet? Why is it a poisonous? What's it called? Why is it poisonous then? It should just be
Not good.
ineffective. The answer is, it follows the modality of how you are. If I do it l'shem shamayim, it brings life. If I don't do it l'shem shamayim, but it's not for a bad reason, then what is it? It's fine. It doesn't have the same effect on you, but it brings you eventually to the right reason. When you're using it in the wrong way, you're using it like a knife. What does the Torah become?
Death.
A weapon. It becomes a weapon. And what happens when you're playing around with guns? You get shot. Okay? Now, we're gonna end over here with this. We'll continue with Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah next week, Be'ezrat Hashem.